Hey everyone, and welcome to this channel's very first Digimon deck profile. Yeah, kind of feels a little weird to say that, but you know what? Let's just roll with it. And where better to start than with my go-to in every playthrough of Digimon World 3, Gallantmon. Okay, well, technically it's the cooler and edgier version of Gallantmon, but you know. Starting off with the deck boss himself, Gallantmon X has a pretty respectable stat line. It evolves for 4 off of a level 5, or for 1 off of a Gallantmon. It has 12,000 DP, which is pretty standard for level 6 boss monsters, and of course it has the X-Antibody trait, which gives it access to all of that juicy support. A Gallantmon X sports 2 effects. The first is a when digivolving effect that deletes one of your opponent's Digimon with the lowest DP. This first effect has an additional clause that allows you to unsuspend Gallantmon X if no Digimon was deleted by it. The second effect is a once per turn, on the player's turn, which allows you to trash the top card of your opponent's security when you delete one of their Digimon. But there is a condition though. You need to have either Gallantmon or X-Antibody in the Digivolution sources to proc this effect. Gallantmon X really excels at taking on one-stack decks. Its Digivolution effect is best used when your opponent has only one Digimon in play, ideally their big scary tower. This lets you clear their board, trash a security thanks to the secondary effect, and then, you know, start swinging. Wider boards are a bit of an issue specifically for Gallantmon X because it deletes one Digimon with the lowest DP. But the deck does have plenty of tools to help whittle the enemy board down to just one Digimon anyway. And it goes without saying that you really want to evolve this on top of Gallantmon, or at least on a level 5 with X-Antibody in its stack. Gallantmon X doesn't really apply much pressure when it can't trash the enemy's security after all. So now that we know what we're building towards, let's see how we get there. The Gallantmon X deck is pretty straightforward in terms of how you build it. You basically run nothing but the Guilmon line and its X-Antibody equivalents. The general idea is to take advantage of the X-Antibody gimmick to draw a ton of cards, which will help you climb up your line pretty quickly. And along the way, you can make use of the Guilmon line's deletion effects to gain advantage while clearing the opponent's board. Starter deck Growlmon is the most straightforward example of what this deck actually wants to do. Its inheritable simply nets you 1 memory when you delete one of your opponent's Digimon. So if you noticed, Gallantmon X costs 1 to X-evolve on Gallantmon, but thanks to Growlmon's inheritable, you can claw back that 1 memory assuming you deleted something with Gallantmon X's effect. This memory gain leads to some really amazing tempo plays, especially when combined with the deck's dedicated tamer, Takado. This little guy nets you a memory when you delete one of your opponent's Digimon. So you can Digivolve up, probably pass turn, but then you can proc a deletion trigger. Let's say you're at 2 memory and you pay 4 memory to Digivolve up and use BT2 Gallantmon's effect to delete something with 6,000 DP or less. Once you clear the enemy Digimon, starter deck Growlmon in the sources, and Takado can both proc to gain you 2 memory and then maintain your turn at 0. Takado's other benefit is that he grants Blitz to your Growlmons and Gallantmons. This allows you to apply pressure, even in those situations where you can't quite keep turn. Mostly this means that you can go into your Gallantmons from your War Growlmons at the end of your turn. But there are some really fun applications that Takado has alongside one of our 2 option cards. I'm of course referring to the X-Antibody option card. It does a lot, but the only effect we really care about is the inheritable, which you get by equipping it to any Digimon you have in play. On attack, not once per turn, you can Digivolve into a Digimon with X-Antibody in its traits by paying its Digivolution cost. So if you're missing Takado, this could still let you Blitz in essence, going up into Gallantmon X, or one of our level 7s. You can pair this alongside Takado in order to effectively climb up 2 stages while attacking, which is kind of cracked. Now, all of this is great, but there's one more aspect of the Gallantmon deck that we need to look at. A Gallantmon likes to trash security. The D2 Gallantmon was the first to have this kind of effect. Basically, for every 10 cards in the opponent's trash, Gallantmon will melt an opponent's security on attack. Whether through deletion effects, battle in general, or by milling your opponent's cards, you want to fill up your opponent's trash as rapidly as possible. Getting your opponent to a low security count and a high trash count can essentially allow Gallantmon to swing for a game, since the attack connects after trashing security. One of your most important pieces in filling up the trash and making big plays is EX3 War Growlmon. On Digivolution, both players mill 3, and then if either player has at least 5 cards in their trash, you can play a Tokado or a Guilmon from your hand or trash for free. Assuming you had the 3 memory to go into this guy, you can essentially set up Tokado to blitz into your Gallantmon immediately after, which feels pretty nice. And if you're going into BT2 Gallantmon, you might have just put enough cards in the trash to melt a security. The last key card I want to mention before zooming through the rest of the deck is Cool Boy. It digs for X-Antibody cards on play, yes, plural, and it nets you a memory and draws a card when you X-evolve into something. All of this for a cost of 2. Broken. Just broken. Mostly, Cool Boy helps you fix your hand as you try to build your ideal stack, but it's also good at clawing back the 1 memory you might need to climb 1 more level. In multiples, Cool Boy becomes really disgusting, letting you go neutral or even positive when X-evolving, and during Gallantmon X plays, it could bring the memory back to your side to enable some absolutely brutal finishers. So now that you understand what the deck does and what cards enable its main lines of play, let's have a quick look at everything else that we're throwing in here. If you're playing Red Gallantmon, then you are hard-pressed to find a better Digitama than EX2 Digimon. The effect is very simple and very effective. When attacking, once per turn, draw a card if you're part of the Guilmon evolution line. This deck honestly has some weird consistency issues that kind of confound the mind, so having that draw power really does come in clutch. Our first and arguably most important rookie is the starter deck Guilmon. This little guy can warp Digivolve into a Gallantmon for a cost of 4 if your opponent has level 6 or higher Digimon in play. That is an absolutely fantastic comeback mechanic that on its own can enable some pretty flashy combos. The first combo requires Guilmon, Tokado, and any regular Gallantmon. Let's say your opponent just swung with their big level 6 and cleared your board, but you have starter deck Guilmon in the raising area and a Tokado in play. You promote Guilmon and then you declare Warp Digivolution. You pay 4, going into your Gallantmon of choice, and then you use Tokado to declare Blitz, allowing you to swing into and hopefully over your enemy's level 6. The next combo is basically a repeat of the first, except you equip Guilmon with the X-Antibody option card. Then you warp Digivolve into Gallantmon like before and declare Blitz thanks to Tokado. Now you can also trigger the X-Antibodies effect to evolve even further, in this case into Gallantmon X to pop the enemy's level 6 and trash a security while you're at it. There is one more combo in this vein that goes even crazier, but we're going to save that for a little later in the video, so stick around. Next up for our rookies, we have the EX2 Guilmon, which is the deck's main digger. On play, it searches for the higher stages of the Guilmon line, as well as Tokado, which you obviously need to get in play as soon as possible. And our last rookie is Guilmon X. You can X-evolve this on top of your other rookies for a draw, and to pop a small body, while its inheritable increases the threshold of your DP-based deletion effects, which you'll see is going to be a theme in the higher levels. EX3 Growlmon is here to support the mill strategy. On Digivolution, it either pops a small body or mills 2, and it gives security attack +1 as an inheritable, assuming you have a spare Digimon to delete, perhaps a Guilmon that you just summoned with EX3 War Growlmon's effect. Gallantmon X is this deck's somewhat underwhelming X-Antibody champion. Unlike Greymon X or Garurumon X, Gallantmon X does not give its stack protection. It just has the same inheritable as Guilmon X. So, moving on. This deck can make room for starter deck War Growlmon, if only because there are times when you need to aggro at level 5, and its on attack does let you pop something small, which, can potentially net you enough triggers to keep playing. Tokado and X-Antibody pay dividends when comboed with this card, just so you know, and it does give security attack +1 as it's inheritable when you do what the deck does best. Pop something. And then we come to War Growlmon X-Antibody. This card, oh my god. When digivolving, it places a persistent effect on 2 of your opponent's Digimon that nets you 1 memory when they are deleted. Then, if you have War Growlmon or X-Antibody in the sources, you can delete Digimon whose total DP adds up to 6,000 or less, or a little more if Gallantmon X or Growlmon X are in the stack. So, you can potentially gain 2 memory on Digivolution while clearing the field of a couple small threats or 1 medium-sized one. Yeah, pretty broken. This is why the X-Antibody cards are absolutely nuts and, mandatory. Reaching towards our higher levels, we have starter deck Gallantmon, which is really just a cheap beatstick. It digivolves for 3 and has security attack +1 naturally, as well as a dual condition effect where it either pops something small or gives you a DP boost. You don't often stay on starter deck Gallantmon, but it does apply sufficient pressure when it comes out, and it doesn't really require any setup to get going, so you do make this your main mega outside of the X-Antibody version. We've already touched on BT2 Gallantmon a little earlier, but I will note here that it does have the ability to pop something with 6,000 DP or less when digivolving, on the condition that you have a red tamer in play. So, Tokado, obviously. And we have already talked about Gallantmon X in depth, so let's look at our level 7s next. We play 2 level 7s, the first being Gallantmon Crimson Mode. On Digivolution, it deletes all of your opponent's Digimon with the highest DP, which is great for popping threatening stacks. And it has a beefed up version of BT2 Gallantmon's when attacking effect. It trashes 1 automatically on declaration of attack, and then melts an additional security for every 10 cards in the opponent's trash. You don't always go into Crimson Mode, but when you do, it's usually for game. And then since this is an X-Antibody deck, you can tech in 1 copy of Omnimon X-Antibody from BT10. You can reduce its hefty evolution cost by 2 if digivolving from an X-Antibody Digimon, Gallantmon X in this case. And when digivolving, it spins all your opponent's Digimon with the highest level to the bottom of the owner's deck. Generally speaking, you want to delete things in this deck to proc the Gallantmon line's effects, but there are times when you can't or don't want to delete something. I think the best way to demonstrate this is to show off that combo that I teased earlier. Let's say your opponent has a very sticky threat and deletion is just not an option. We'll go with Millenniummon in this case. If you kill it while it has a source, it'll just come back and potentially swing for game on the next turn. So, with our trusty starter deck Gallantmon in the raising and Tokado in play, we move out. You equip the X-Antibody option and then declare Warp Digivolution. You climb into Gallantmon and declare Blitz with Tokado's effect. Then you trigger X-Antibody's Inheritable and, paying a hefty 7, you digivolve into Omnimon X and spin the Millenniummon away. That's not a combo you'll go into quite often, given the setup involved, but it does illustrate the point. The Gallantmon X couldn't clear the field, just hard digivolve into Omnimon X or use X-Antibody's effect to warp up and spin away any sticky threats while you're attacking. Omnimon X also has an effect that procs when digivolving or when attacking, which lets you return a level 6 source or an X-Antibody option from its stack to the bottom of your deck in order to look at your opponent's security, and just choose a card from there to trash. If you've been trashing your opponent's security already, then you can potentially go for lethal. And for the last couple cards, we do run one other option in Crimson Blaze. This can be made dirt cheap thanks to starter deck Growlmon and even War Growlmon X, as well as its own cost reduction effect. It's good for crowd control and for floodgating certain decks like Bloomlord and Jesmon. And finally, we do play one more tamer in Hero Monokawa because memory setters are cool, and because Gallantmon, generally speaking, has pretty low DP compared to most level 6s, so this can help it survive the odd security check or swing over a big body that you just couldn't delete with one of its effects. And that's Gallantmon X in a nutshell. Mill, trash, delete, warp digivolve, and punch for game. The deck is honestly very piece reliant, and even with access to Cool Boy, you'll often find yourself just missing the next card that you need to keep the pressure up. And if it wasn't clear already, the deck is very much focused on building one big stack. One big stack, I will note, that does not have protection. If your Gallantmon X gets cleared, it is going to set you back a lot. You have some comeback plays thanks to the Warp Digivolution mechanic, but you won't always have a Guilmon in raising, or maybe you need to take a turn to set that up, or maybe your opponent just doesn't have the level 6 out to enable you to warp. Still, when this deck goes off, it goes hard. You can annihilate boards, trash pesky security options, and potentially punch your opponent for lethal out of nowhere. This deck especially preys on purple decks since they like to fill their trash, as well as decks like D-Brigade who are looking to reach certain trash thresholds in order for them to pop off. And of course, you feast on decks that like to spam the board, like Bloomlord or Jesmon, though you should handle those two in particular with extreme caution. The list and ratios presented here are just a starting point, full disclosure. They've worked well for me in testing, but don't take them as gospel by any means. After all, I am just a faceless YouTuber doing a deck profile. And, you know, at the end of the day, just take the cards and have fun with them. Yeah, Gallantmon is not exactly a tier 1 deck yet, but it's a blast to play, and it can catch the top meta dogs by surprise if you pilot it well. I am speaking from experience there. So hey, if you guys enjoyed the deck profile, make sure to like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. Sealed Only 1v1 should be back on track by next week, and hopefully by then, I have my own answers to the Gallantmon deck that has been menacing me for the last couple of weeks. I will catch you all in the next one, and until then, take it easy.